Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm here with something new for your notebook. So when I was a kid, I absolutely adored letter writing. I loved sending pen pals to friends, whether they lived close by or not. I loved creating those little kid-friendly, homemade, handmade cards and popping those into the mail. And I absolutely loved getting mail. I would race down to the end of the driveway to check the mailbox in hopes that there was something there for me. I know that many of you can relate because as book lovers and notebook lovers, we often just share a love of the written word, especially the handwritten word. And we really appreciate those old-fashioned gestures like sending a card in the mail, maybe with a sticker inside, or sending a postcard in the mail, like my book postcards that I love to send. Which, by the way, if you haven't gotten a snail mail book postcard from me, just go to my site, alitlife.com, click on the free goodie tab, and you'll be able to send a request in for me to send you a handwritten, personalized book recommendation in the old-fashioned snail mail through a book postcard that looks like a library card. But anyway, back to my childhood of loving letter writing. That practice definitely got away from me as I got older. Now, yes, I still write a lot. I send a lot of emails. I send a lot of texts, but I'm not so good at sending those old-fashioned letters in the mail. I don't think I've ever sent a Christmas card. I have hopes and dreams of sending them, of maybe sending Valentine's cards or something similar, but I just tend not to get around to it. Until now, I have re-embraced the art of letter writing, but in a way that you might not expect. I am back to writing letters and lots of them, but I never send them. That is right. I am writing letters to people and things and situations that I never send. In fact, they never see the light of day outside the covers of my notebook. And that's the practice that I want to share with you today. Letter writing in your notebook with absolutely no intention of sending it. Now, there is a lot of research on this practice in the psychology and the therapy world. We already know all of the benefits that expressive narrative writing can have, but when you frame that expressive narrative writing in a letter format to a particular audience, lots of really good things can happen. So writing letters, and yes, handwritten is typically better. Excuse me, I'm still getting over that flu because of that hand to brain connection, but typing certainly works well here with this idea of letter writing as a therapy tool. If we write letters that we never send, a couple of things can happen for us. Number one, it can just help us get clarity. When we write for ourselves on the page, we can sometimes write a whole lot about nothing. And we can jump around from topic to topic and not really accomplish what we want to accomplish on the page. But when you are writing to a particular audience, even if that audience will never, ever, ever see that letter, we do tend to write a little bit differently. We write to get a little bit more clarity. It helps us get a new perspective when we have someone or something pictured in our mind. And that greater clarity and new perspective can sometimes be the game changer that we need. Now, writing letters that we'll never send can help us process and release emotions, right? You may never get to a real life conversation that you want or need to have, but duplicating it in a letter form as if you were can help your body to process and release all of that stored emotion, right? The body keeps the score. Even if they don't ever see it, it can help your body make the leap through all of that emotion. It can help us think deeply about the lessons we've learned in our lives, in the experiences that we've gone through. It can help us get closure on certain things, right? We can write letters to people or situations or goodbyes to people and situations that we either need or want to leave behind. It can help us embrace gratitude depending on what we're writing about. And it could even, if we choose, help us prepare for a hard conversation in actual life. That letter writing is kind of the pre-writing script, so to speak, of what do you want to say and how do you want to say it? And practicing it in your notebook can make sure that all of those words don't escape you when the time comes. So there's so much to a letter writing practice, and specifically a letter writing practice that you will never send. Now, I don't know if you've read this book. It is a fun one. I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. And in this book, in order to help her work through some emotions she has to just release them and feel better, she will write her emails to her coworkers. And then before she sends them, she will go down to the bottom of the email and write what she really wishes she could say. And she will actually physically type it out. But before she sends it, she changes the font color to white so that it is not visible. So it's still there. She still feels good about getting it out there, but the recipient will never see it. This is kind of the same thing, writing letters in your journal that no one will ever read. Now, spoiler alert, she forgets to white out that message in one of those emails, and that's what launches this delightful book. So if that sounds like something you would like to do, or you want to know what happens next, I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue is a great book for you. So now, let's think about how we could do this and what this looks like. So if you are a typical journaler, if you are a typical morning pager, then you're used to just opening up your notebook and writing whatever comes out. Sometimes, though, a prompt is helpful, a structure is helpful, some sort of sentence starter to get us started getting that emotion out on the page. So simply opening up your notebook and putting "Dear" and you fill in the blank can be all we need to jumpstart our writing on the page. Now, I'll give you some ideas of who and what you could write to in a minute, but I just want to be really clear. Again, no one sees these letters other than you. I mean, maybe if you choose to give it to someone, you could, but this idea is that it is a therapeutic release. So when you are writing it, you are not worrying about that audience seeing it. That means we do not edit the writing. It just comes out on the page, mistakes and all. Spelling mistakes, leave them. Trip over your own words, leave them. Worried about what someone would think if they saw it, leave it, because they're not. This is your chance to be so honest from the gut, from your stream of consciousness, because no one is going to see it, of course, unless you choose to. And after, I'll show you some ways that you can literally cover it up to make sure you don't accidentally hit send. Although that's why it's in your notebook and not in an email, because you can't accidentally hit send. So this is a therapeutic technique where you're just getting things out and there's no worry about what it looks like, what it sounds like. You just want to get what you need to get on the page to get that clarity, that new perspective, release those emotions, get closure, whatever you're after in this kind of practice. So now you're ready. You've got your notebook, You've got your favorite writing utensil. You put Dear so-and-so at the top of the page. Who could you write to? Well, there's a couple of different categories. Therapist Aid online has a really great structure for this that I have borrowed for my own recent letter writing practice. And I think the letters that I enjoy the most are my letters to self. Right? This is literally writing a letter to yourself in your notebook. And there are a couple of different ways that you could do it. You could write a letter to your past self. You could write a letter to your present self. You could write a letter to your future self. You could even write a letter as if you were your future self, writing backwards to your present self. That just got a little complicated. But basically, you can write letters to any version of yourself at any point during your life to help you think through anything, right? So if we are writing letters to our past selves, right, some sort of version of our past, then we might offer understanding and grace for something that we went through. We might offer healing or compassion to ourselves. If we are writing to our future self, right, then we can help ourselves set goals, remind us of what's important, of what we know about our life so far, about what we want it to be, right? This helps us channel that inner wisdom to give us our priorities that we want to focus on. Now, writing a letter to our present self, that can help us see a current situation we are in differently. Maybe we're writing to ourselves to help us grapple with some sort of internal conflict. Maybe we're writing to our present self to give us advice about a problem that we are going through, and just switching that perspective to an outside view of ourselves to ourselves can give us a new perspective that we need. So you can write letters to your past self, your present self, your future self, or even go forward in time and then go backwards and write a letter to yourself that your future self thinks that you need to hear right now. I know it might seem a little wooey, but every time I do something like this, I really am shocked at how much it helps me express myself on the page and how it just helps me feel better. Now, let's think of other people, though. Yes, we can write letters to ourselves, but we can also write letters to other people from our past, other people from our present, and other people from our future, right? And there are all sorts of things we can do with those kind of letters. We could write a letter to someone in our past for something that they hurt us about, and we can talk to them about it and ask them questions and figure out what was going on, right? You can write a letter to someone in your life right now who you need to have a conversation with, but you don't really want to, or you're not really ready. And so you just write a letter to that. You can also write a letter to anybody else in the present, in the future, and talk about something you wish they would do in the future, something that you need that you're hoping to express to them. Right? So these can be people that you are close with, right? They can be family members, they could be friends, they could be co-workers, but they could also be strangers. It could be the person who serves you your coffee. It could be someone famous that you wish you met. It could be a historical figure that you've got a problem with or wish you could meet. All bets are off here. It's writing to anyone, past, present, or future, to help you think through anything you need to think through. So we've got letters to self. We have letters to others. We also have letters to a situation, right? Letters to a situation. So these are things that have happened to you that you're trying to work through. So maybe you have an illness or some sort of physical health condition, and you're going to write to that. Maybe you have a mental health condition that you're struggling with, and you're going to write to your anxiety, to your depression, to your OCD, to your eating disorder, whatever it is. Maybe there's an addiction that you're working through, and so you're writing a letter to alcohol, to tobacco, to caffeine, to sugar. Maybe you're going through a life transition. You're starting a new job. You're leaving a job. You're starting a new relationship, leaving a new relationship. You've got an empty nest / open door. So you're not necessarily writing to the people involved in those situations. You're writing to the situation itself. And it can do a whole bunch of things. It can help you vent. It can help you get all of the negative emotion out. It can help you find grace in that situation. It can help you find the gift in that situation. Again, it's just another way of giving some sort of concrete, real life audience to help you express something. Now, back a couple of years ago, I don't even remember when, I was part of the Slice of Life writing challenge, where every single day in the month of March in this particular year, I wrote a letter, a short letter, to someone or something, and I posted it on my blog. And they were usually letters of gratitude. So something wonderful that my kids did that day, and then I would write a letter to them. But sometimes it was writing a letter to an object. I remember when I wrote a letter to the Starbucks pup cup, those little teeny tiny cups with the whipped cream, because my daughter and I had brought our Yorkie who had broken her leg through the drive-through, and they gave her a pup cup. And it was the cutest thing to see her in her teeny tiny pink leg cast, licking up whipped cream like it was the best thing in the world. So I wrote a letter to the pup cup. I wrote a letter to a stranger I saw doing a kind gesture on the street. I wrote letters to anyone and anything that intersected with me on that day. And when I reflected back on that situation, or I guess that experience, I really was so surprised that some of the letters I loved the most were the letters to inanimate objects and to situations I was in. Don't knock it until you try it. It really is a therapeutic exercise, but it also can be a really creative one. Now, I want to mention one more thing, and that's that you can write letters to a particular concept or an idea, right? You could write a letter to love. You could write a letter to joy. You could write a letter to abundance. You could write a letter to productivity, right? Think about your one word themes that you might choose for the year. You know, I choose them every month. This month, I could write a letter to sparkle. That doesn't really fit grammatically, but I would figure it out. Think about the one words that roll around in your head or those one word intentions. You could write a letter to that. Dear freedom, here's what I think I want more of. Here's my stumbling blocks. How can I better connect with you? Right? I know it's wooey. It really is so effective on the notebook. So let me just recap for a minute. Let's write letters we will never send in our notebook. We could write them to ourselves, our past versions, our present versions, our future versions, and even our future versions looking back on our present version now. You could write to another person, another relationship you have, both past, present, and future. Maybe you're apologizing for something, asking for forgiveness, grappling with someone else who needs to do that for you, sharing your feelings, saying goodbye, all of those things. You could write a letter to a situation, right, that's going on in your life, whether that's something physically in your body, mentally in your body, some sort of transition that you're going through. Or you could write a letter to a word, a one-word concept that's either eluding you or you want to get closer to, and writing the letter can show you how. Now, I'm guessing that one of these things sounds appealing to you. One of these things, as you were listening, you thought, yeah, I actually need that. I actually could do that in my notebook. I want you to take that gut reaction of what it is, and I want you to promise me that by the end of the week, you're going to try it in your notebook. Even if it's a quick note on a note card, right? It doesn't have to be a 3 pages worth of stream of consciousness thinking. It can be short and sweet. It can be longer and more thorough. It can be whatever you need. And remember, no one else sees it. And you can make sure of this. You can actually go to that notebook page where you have your letter and you can do something to it so that no one can physically see it. Number one, you could just rip it out of your notebook. You could then burn it, or you could throw it in the trash underneath the coffee grounds so you can make sure that no one ever sees it. But you could get more creative and layer on some art therapy as well. We talked about this in past episodes. Episode 157, I talked about what to do with your old notebooks. You could take these pages where you've written letters to people that you have no intention of sending, and you could create a blackout poem, which basically means you take a black Sharpie and you cover up everything on the page except particular words that are jumping out at you. And that gives you a creative, abbreviated look at your letter, but no one actually knows what it is. You could paint over it, right? You could paint over it in colors that match the mood or the theme of how you're feeling. You could raise your vibration around it and paint in the colors that match the theme and the vibe that you're feeling in the future that you want to feel. Or maybe you just watercolor over it and you let it marinate in and sink in as you slide those watercolors across the page. Or maybe you collage. You literally cover it up with pieces of paper, with really cool pieces of paper, with magazine clippings. My friend Amy Soto, who is a devout listener of the podcast, she is such a great collager, and she has inspired me to try this in my notebook to cover up some of the things I don't necessarily want others to see. And so collaging after you write your letter can be a great way to ensure no one sees it. Now, of course, you don't have to do any of those things. You can just keep that notebook private and hidden, and that's it. You've gotten out on the page what you need to get out. Now, I want to leave you with one last thing. If you try this, and I hope you do, whether you cover up the pages or not, I want you to think about 3 things when you're done. Number 1, what was your gut reaction to this idea? Did you instantly want to do it and you knew exactly who or what you were going to write to? Or did you think, this is a bit weird. I don't do things that, aren't logical and purposeful, and I don't know if I need it. So just think about what was your gut reaction and why may it have been that way? And what did you learn about yourself from thinking about it? Number 2, as you wrote these letters, what emotions came up? Were they negative? Were they positive? Were they grateful? Were they frustrated? What emotions did you allow your body to feel and experience and therefore release by doing something like this on the page? And then the third thing, what insights could you just take away from this whole thing? Was this a positive experience for you? And if it wasn't positive, was it beneficial in the fact that maybe it didn't feel positive in the moment, but later you started to notice some of those impacts? So what's your gut reaction? What emotions came up? What insights do you have? And how can that help you in your future? Like, you don't have to write a letter to someone all the time. I love this as a go-to practice that I keep in my back pocket. On those days where the words aren't coming freely, on the days where I'm frustrated by what's showing up on the page, choosing someone or something or some concept to write to can be just that little kick in the pants you need to feel more productive on the page. Okay, I'm hoping that you are taking me up on that challenge. You are going to go with the prompt that is calling to you, and you are going to try this in your notebook this week. And if you do, of course, I would love to know about it. And if you have different ideas for who or what you might write to, I want to know those too. Find me online at alitlife.com and put your ideas in the show notes. You can head to Substack and find my weekly literate love letter there and comment on the episode overview I provided. Go to any social media platform at AfinitoLit. Go to the Afinito Lit, a Lit Life Facebook group, or of course, leave me an audio message in your favorite podcast platform. This has been another one of those game changers for my therapeutic, expressive, narrative writing practice. And it has really made me feel like I'm moving forward and that my morning page writing is even more productive than it has in the past. And so I hope that this idea, this one little thing that could change everything, is just as powerful as it is for me, for you. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I will see you in the next episode. And in the meantime, happy reading and writing. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow, and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.